Hello my friends and welcome back to my channel. We have a tag for you today on Tuesday. It's a little late coming, but I was tagged today actually, making this one of the shortest turnarounds I've had on doing a tag, and it was one that had me got me thinking really quickly about some of my answers, and I wanted to waste no time in getting to this so that all of you will have a chance to consider it and do it yourself, because I think this is a really good and interesting one. A lot of it's dependent on what you read and what your personal preference and interpretations are. So there's going to be a diverse range of answers. This is the My Modern Literary Canon tag. I was tagged by Liam from Liam's Lyceum, and the original is by Ink and Paper Blog. So I'll have both of those linked down below. And this has 3 questions. In each of these 3 questions, you're going to contribute 5 authors. So the first question is what 5 authors form your literary foundation for your modern literary canon. So these are authors that are no longer with us. They're currently dead, so they're not actively writing anymore. They have been published within the last 100 years, so we're not looking back into further back. So there's parameters on the time frame that we're considering here, and ones that have established a legacy here. They are the foundation, that bedrock that everything else is built upon. And so, of course, we'll get the obvious one out of the way right away, because if you know me, if you've watched my channel, you know exactly which one's coming, and that is Rr Tolkien. You can't get away from him in the fantasy genre. And I grew up with the fantasy genre. And I never get tired of reading Tolkien. I could read and reread his works probably endlessly and still not get tired of it. It is the definition of a comfort read for me, is to pick up one of his works. And so that is my answer for the first of the authors. The second author I'm going to talk about is one that I recently discovered, but has already earned his way onto this status, and he fits the bill. And that is Robert E. Howard. I've now read 4 of his works. I'm midway, about a quarter of the way through a 5th. Only one of them being a Conan volume. So I'm reading diversely across his works, and across the board, it's just fantastic. And it grew the sword and sorcery genre. They are action-packed adventures, but they have deep characters with deep motivations. And I'm just absolutely loving Robert E. Howard and everything that he's written so far. And I can't wait to read more by him, including my other 2 Conan volumes, which I need to get to sooner rather than later. Third on my list, I had a couple of competitors for this slot, and I think I'm going to ultimately go with the easy answer of Isaac Asimov. Very, very prolific in the field of science fiction, and helped really shape and grow it during the golden age of science fiction. Wrote a lot of books, a lot of stories, anthologized a whole bunch of stuff, and you can't escape his name and his fingerprints. I mean, one of the magazines has got his name in it, and so he was a big influencer. And not only that, but he wrote really good stuff. Even today, the Foundation series, which I'm holding up the first book there, is still incredibly readable and enjoyable today, which is just a testament to how well he did at crafting what he came up with. So next, we have the other that should come as no surprise. That's Ray Bradbury. When it comes to short stories, there is no one that cemented in place as being the master of short fiction, for me, than Ray Bradbury. He had it down to an art. And it is evident in everything that this guy wrote. It is just magnificent. He wrote all the time, was always writing things, and had such imagination and depth, emotion, could evoke lots and lots of interesting atmosphere in his stories. And Bradbury's just wonderful. Whether you're looking at his novels or at his short stories, he is just a fantastic writer, pound for pound. And I don't expect him to lose this spot over time. Harlan Ellison, rightfully, could possibly contend with Isaac Asimov for this spot. But I don't think that Bradbury has any chance of losing it. And so the one, I don't have something to hold up here for this one, which surprised me. I probably should change that. But it is the one that immediately came to mind after Tolkien and Howard and Bradbury. This writer came to mind, and there is no denying the influence that he's had on an entire genre of writing out there, and that is Stan Lee. Love him or hate him, regardless of what you think of the guy, he shaped comics tremendously with what he did, and his legacy is going to be felt for ages. And it's masterful what he was able to do. Without Stan Lee, I don't know that we would have a thriving comic industry still today. And you'll see this pattern in these fives. This had 2 fantasy, 2 science fiction, and 1 comic, and you will see that repeated on all 3 of these. So the next category, so the second prompt here, is 5 authors who are still living today that have already established a lasting legacy. So these are not necessarily the young authors, the ones that are just starting out. These are the ones that have already shaped and impacted the genre. They might still be writing some, but their impact is on what has already been established by them, rather than so much as to what they might be producing now. So we're going to start back in fantasy with the first one, and that's Robin Hobb. She's been writing books for a long time, because this book right here, I remember reading as a child and absolutely loving, and it's been a while, and she's been writing and shaping this genre, and this was her very first book, and it is fantastic, and it only continues to amaze me from there. Everything I've read by Robin Hobb, I've absolutely loved. And she has a very long-running set of interconnected small series that I'm excited to explore further. So that is my first answer for living authors that have an established legacy. Next up, we have Joe Haldeman. He is still alive today, and I would love to meet Joe Haldeman, because he just seems like he would be the type of person that you feel honored to have met. And this book right here is the one that really shaped an industry as kind of a counter to Robert A. Heinlein and the romanticizing of the conflict, of the wars with the in space. This is very much a counter to that, and it does so in such a masterful way. I've read only a handful of things by Joe Haldeman. I've since gotten a couple of others that I'm going to be checking out soon. Hopefully, both of which I'm going to be checking out this month. One of them being my Star Trek book that I'm going to be reading this month. I found it over the weekend and had to pick it up because it's Joe Haldeman. And if anybody's going to get me to enjoy Star Trek in a novelization form, it's probably Joe Haldeman. It's been his longer books, his books rather than his short fiction, that have made a real mark on the landscape of science fiction. And he definitely fits the criteria. Now we're circling back over to fantasy. And it's a name who is arguably still kind of shaping things, but I think that he's impacting things in a different way than he was in his younger years. And that is, of course, George R.R. Martin. So this is one of the anthologies that he helped anthologize with Gardner Dozois. And I think that's where he ultimately has fallen into. He's really grown as an anthologist. I've enjoyed some of his older short fiction that I've encountered so far. Obviously, everybody's going to think of the Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire series. And the disappointment over waiting for book 6 and wondering if it's ever going to be finished. And I'm among those that every time I see something new that's coming out that has his fingerprints on it, and it's not the next book in that series, I'm disappointed in that too. But there's no denying things like Rogues, Old Venus, Dangerous Women have helped to shape the shorter fiction, which is an area that fantasy especially doesn't really get a lot of focus and recognition for. So not only his famous series with Westeros, you can spread that umbrella now to include all of those, but also his anthologizing and his works of shorter fiction back in the day when he dabbled a lot in science fiction as well as grew into fantasy. Next up, we go back to science fiction. We have John Scalzi. He's still writing today. He still appears to be, one of the younger authors. But if you look back to Old Man's War, much like Robin Hobb, his name has been in prominence within the genre for quite some time. He's still putting out things. He still has his own unique flair, his own style on what he's doing. Multi-award winning, and just continues to put out good stuff today. But even if he didn't put out another piece of writing from going forward, he already has established that legacy on the strength of what he has written with Red Shirts, with the Old Man's War series. And so there's a good case to make for him. And it was a toss-up for me between holding up Scalzi or grabbing Dan Simmons. And I think either of them could easily fit into that spot. So there's my unofficial 6th. That would be Dan Simmons, who has been very prolific in writing across a breadth of genres. And as I explore more of him, I expect he'll probably compete for that spot, either with Scalzi or George R.R. Martin. And so the comic book writer I wanted to talk about in this spot is Brian K. Vaughan, which may or may not be the secret identity of Michael K. Vaughan. I think we could make an argument for that. But I'm holding up Saga, which is probably the one that he's best known for at this point in time. But he also did ones like Why the Last Man, Paper Girls, which is currently being touted. I saw something very recently on, if you're waiting for the next season of Stranger Things, you should check out Paper Girls. And he's written a whole bunch of Marvel and DC comics. So he's been very involved in the industry for many, many years. And just like Scalzi, even though he's still active right now, if he never wrote another comic, he could rest on his laurels of what he's already accomplished. And so that's why I'm putting him in this established legacy category. And so last but certainly not least, the final prompt is 5 authors that are currently writing, so have published something within the last 10 years, and are building the future. So these are the ones that are shaping the landscape that we're seeing today, and making what it is for future writers in that genre. So 2 of these I don't have a book to actually hold up for, but we're going to start with one that I actually do have a book to hold up, and that is Brandon Sanderson. Now, you could argue he could have gone into the established legacy, but he is showing that he is still trying to innovate and pave the way. So not only is he ridiculously, grossly prolific as an author, and part of that's because he has an established style, and you know what you're going to get when you pick up a Brandon Sanderson novel. You know what his strengths are, you know where he's going to be a little lacking, and as long as you know that and are okay with that, then you're not going to walk away disappointed, because he can tell a great story along the way. But with his recent Kickstarter campaign and trying to get around the traditional publishing method and things like that, I mean, he is paving the way for future authors to probably not with that degree of success. I mean, there's a lot that went right for him to be able to do all that. But it did go to show that there could be other avenues out there for authors in the industry. And, he's going to be hopefully writing for a long time, which will fill everybody. Will have an entire bookshelf, not just a shelf on a shelf, but an entire bookshelf that would have to be dedicated just to Brandon Sanderson to contain everything this guy's going to write in his lifetime, because he's just at a breakneck pace. Next, we're going to talk about John Gwynn. Now, I've only read this one book by him, so take it with a grain of salt. But I have a hunch, based on what I've heard about John Gwynn, not only with this series, but with his Malice series, that he is one of those authors that is absolutely building the future of this genre. And I love the way he took it. He broke away from the traditional fantasy mold, the sword and sorcery influenced. We're going out on a quest, an adventure, and it's all going to be very tropey. And this has got deep Norse mythological influences in it, and it's just fantastic. So, the first one that I can't hold up, and this is the rare appearance of an author that I actually do not enjoy. I have given her 3 strikes, and she's out. As far as I'm concerned, I'm probably not going to actively pick up anything that she writes in the future. That's not out of any dislike of her as a person, though, and I still can absolutely respect what she's doing, and respect that there are people that are going to love these stories. And I can appreciate them for what they are and what they do. It's just not the type of storytelling and the approach that I'm enjoying right now. And that is Becky Chambers. I read 2 novellas by her last year. I read her Long Way to a Small Angry Planet this year. And while they were all fine, none of them blew me away. And none of them left me saying, yes, I want to read more. So, take that as it is. I do enjoy what she's doing for the industry and the path she's paving. And the way she's growing and shaping science fiction. I hope that there's a balance, that we don't have a lot of Becky Chambers clones, because, as I said, her writing style is not really jiving with me personally. But I am glad it jives with a lot of other people. She definitely deserves a spot. But the other author that is in science fiction that I can't hold up, but that I think is equally paving the way, providing a fantastic voice, but is actually one that I do genuinely enjoy, is Martha Wells, with the Murderbot series so far. I haven't looked to see what else she's written, if anything, but that in itself is enough, because it's going to draw in more readers. It provided proof that a novella format can still be successful, which is something that's hard to think these days, that you would expect it to be just very established voices that would be able to sell novellas. And between her and Nnedi Okorafor, who would be the unofficial sixth, the author of the Binti series, have shown that novellas can and will do well with the right publishing, with the right marketing and whatnot behind it. But if it's told and done in a really good way, it will be able to be successful. And so we close here, last but certainly not least, with our graphic novel writer. And so for this one, we have Marjorie Lu, probably most famous right now for Monstrous, but she's also done other work. A couple of Marvel works, including Han Solo, which I have on my shelf. I was happy to see that she's one of the authors on here. So I'll be reading that pretty soon. I'm almost through volume 2 of Monstrous, then I might jump into Han Solo. You know, it has the potential being an IP to fit for Garb August, but I'm excited to see what she does with that, because Han Solo is probably my favorite Star Wars character still today. And so I've always enjoyed that character since I was a kid. And I think that Marjorie Lu is going to be just continue to be a good, strong contributor to the comic industry. And I'm excited to see where she goes from here, and to check out some of the stuff that she's done. I think I saw that she did line on the X-23, so Wolverine kind of spin-off there, Wolverine adjacent character. And just to see what else she's done, and to see how she's going to impact and grow the comic industry. So there you have it. I'm going to tag a couple of people, but as always, if you're interested in this and you think that sounds fun, because I certainly thought it sounded like fun, consider yourself tagged to do this. I'm going to officially tag Michael K. Vaughan, Criminali, Greg from Another Bibliophile Reads, Jeremy Fee, and Michael from Fit to Be Read. I would love to see all of your responses. Let's see, I'm going to tag 2 more here. We'll tag Kristinell from Kristinell SFF Reader, and then Rachel from RK Stumbling Bear. I think that should give us a diverse range of answers. And I'm excited to see what all of you come up with for your 15 choices of authors for your modern literary canon. I expect there's going to be some that'll have some crossover with me. There are going to be some that are going to be wildly different. And I'm excited to hear about some authors that maybe I haven't heard about before and will be on my horizons. So thank you, and I hope you have a great day, BookTube.